Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart Podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 57th episode, I wanted to talk about follow-up. Specifically, what is the appropriate amount of time you should wait to follow up with somebody when you've reached out to them? Now, we'll go through a few scenarios and cover both sides of the spectrum as we go through this process. I'm recording this one from the city of Porto in Portugal, where I'll be spending the next few months. Now, I gotta say, I'm pretty excited to be back here in Portugal after completing a dry run here in the month of May. I look forward to some focused working time and completing several projects that have been dragging on in 2017. I find that the time shifting between being in Europe, plus being a fish out of water in a new country, not really knowing the language, it makes me a lot more productive than when I just spend time in the US. Or maybe I just procrastinate less. I'm not sure of the true answer to that one. Either way, the past several episodes, I've been sharing a lot about how I'm continuing to grow my business, implement systems, and learn from the feedback that comes in along the way. It's been pretty fun to talk about these things in real time because I can validate new ideas very quickly. Sometimes I just need to talk about it out loud, and this is a sounding board where I can just talk about what's going on. And I've also found that as an entrepreneur, it's much better for me to throw ideas against the wall and see what sticks than just to wait for the perfect plan to be in place. Sure, it means a lot more cleanup work moving forward when things do work, but I'm not even sure that moving forward would be an option if I didn't have some validation first. Now, if you've been a fan of this podcast for the last several years, you will agree that most successful guests that I've interviewed rarely waited for the perfect time to jump in. They just jumped. And that's been the idea since before this podcast was even a twinkle in my eye, when it was just a dream and a date on the calendar to interview Rand Fishkin from Moz. You know, back when Rand was still at Moz. And yes, that's a news drop to let you know that I did not pre-record this episode a long time ago. This is being done pretty much in real time. Now, back then when I was starting the podcast, I didn't even have a name for it. So I decided on the Jumpstart Podcast because that's what I wanted the content to achieve, to jumpstart you in whatever direction you chose to take, to inspire people to take action. But on the flip side, is every action worthwhile? How much feedback do you need to know if you're on the right track? Now, I've been mulling over this a lot lately as we work to put systems in place at Jeffalytics. Systems for podcast outreach, sales follow-up, time scheduling, and much more. Each of these systems has a slightly different follow-up process, and each of them is achieving different results. And some of them are consuming my mind space a lot as I move forward because they're not working as well as the other ones. So for today's episode, I wanted to talk about follow-up processes and discuss the right amount of persistence moving forward with each system that I've put in place. Now let's get to 10 talking points about the need for persistence in communication. First point, you get the response you're looking for right away. The truth is that I'm naive enough to believe that everything that I try is going to work each time that I do it, the first time. Literally, I think going into everything that it's a magic bullet and that it's going to solve the problem and knock the problem dead in its tracks. Call me the eternal optimist or call me stupid, but I genuinely think that everything I try is going to work. And most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time the results leave me disappointed, discouraged, and disjointed. Now, we'll talk about why that happens in the remaining 9 bullet points, but for our first one, I wanted to discuss a process that has worked out tremendously well for me, and that's podcast outreach. As of today, I've published over 50 interview podcasts for the Jumpstart Podcast, and this is out of approximately 60 people that I have targeted to join me, 60 emails that I've sent out, reaching out to people saying, would you like to be on the podcast? Now, 50 interviews out of a total of 60 people targeted is tremendous. That's a really good response rate. And of the invites that I've sent out, I've received probably 59 responses. There's only one person who has not emailed me back, and I probably got her email address wrong. I tried emailing her about 4 times, by the way, and still haven't heard back from her. So she's sort of on my list of, she's on my do not call list, I guess you could say. Now, only 2 of the responses that I got just said no outright. Both of those people happen to have worked at Google, either presently or previously. And in both of those cases, I was punching above my weight class. And at least both of them responded. The rest that I talked to, they were interested, but they had scheduling issues, or we scheduled their interview and they didn't show up, and then they haven't responded to my emails. But either way, they responded the first time. We at least had something on the calendar. Now, that is an insane rate of success. So successful that you would think that I would never have trouble filling a time slot for the show. And yet there were several weeks that we went through where I didn't run an interview. Why is that? Because outreach is just one part of the process. And that leads me to number 2. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. Now, the reason why sometimes I don't have a podcast guest is because I don't even know my own schedule. And because of that, because I don't know my own schedule, there'd be a lot of back and forth trying to find a time to record the podcast. So it was hard for me to make myself available for booking because I didn't know what was happening. And the guest couldn't just go and fill out a calendar and click on something and then suddenly be scheduled. And it took me nearly 2 years to get a grip on this and to take it out of my hands. And now I have a process in place. My team member, Gauri, she's taking the scheduling and she's doing a great job at it. And aside from next week, we shouldn't have any problems running an interview podcast ever again. Of course, next week is going to look a little dicey because it takes time for a process to fall in place. Now, I think I talked about this in the scheduling podcast episode number 56, but just to clarify what we're doing here is basically we target people we want for the podcast, we send out an outreach email, and then if they say, yes, we're interested, we send them a link to our schedule and they can book time about up to 90 days in advance on my calendar. And I've filled in all my travel times that I'm not available. And essentially, we can get these things scheduled and have them booked out in advance. And so we've sent this to 6 people, and 5 of them said yes. One of them said, let me know in the fall or something like that, saying, hey, I'm interested, but I'm not interested right now. And so we've had a really good success right there. And I have 5 podcast interviews scheduled in the upcoming weeks and months. And so I don't think we'll ever have to worry about an interview episode again, as long as we follow this process. And now that the process is out of my hands and the scheduling is out of everybody's hands, it's just what's on the calendar, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape. Now, part of the reason why I didn't establish an outreach process before that is because I couldn't even get a hold of my own end of the bargain. But now I'm hopeful that the process will stick and we won't have any issues moving forward. Number 3, when you do everything right, I put it in my air quotes, hand quotes, everything right, and you still hear crickets. Now, I've been reaching out to hot prospects, people who read every email that I send out. So basically, I went into my email system and I said, if you read all the emails that I send out, the ones that I send out on Fridays, they're called the Agency Sage emails, then you're a hot prospect. And I have a list of people. I do some research on their business. I find ways that I can add value. Sometimes I even record videos specifically addressing them, mentioning their name, their business, and talking about how I can help them. And not a lot of them are responding. And it's probably the opposite of my podcast invites. I'm probably getting 10% response rate from a heartfelt email, an email that I send out that's genuinely trying to help somebody. And it's really stumping me to figure it out. But I think actually, as part of this podcast, we're going to figure out the problem as we workshop it here. And it's really been bothering me, and I've been struggling with why aren't these things working? Could it be that I'm oversaturated with sending out emails? Is the subject line off? Is it just not the right time? Or is it just not a big enough sample size? And do I just need to test it on more people and give it patience? Which leads me to number 4. Timing is important. So I just started this process around a major holiday for the majority of my list who's located in the US. It's summer, and every email I send out gets hundreds of out-of-office replies. People, it turns out, are out of the office for most of July. So is this the right time to even start a process? Should I wait? Should I be persistent? Does the message matter right now? Is it really that important? Are people thinking about other things? Is this not the right time to be looking at them? So timing is important. If you start something at the worst time of year to get something to stick, can you really judge yourself for those results? And number 5, what is the right amount of persistence? It's hard to tell if you don't get statistical significance. In most of our communications, we don't worry about statistics. That's because we only do it once until we get a response. You want to apply for a job? You apply and you wait to hear back. If they call you back, then you don't really need A/B split test messages, do you? Basically, you just know that it worked. And maybe you can try your B version of the email 2 years from now when you want the new job. But of course, when you treat things like a number game, you're going to lose your edge. I mentioned one of our core values here at Jeffalytics is to make each communication unique. But does that ring true when you need to send out hundreds of emails in order to even know if it's going to work or not? Or do you have to come to a conclusion more quickly? Number 6, consider the value equation. It's not always about how many times you follow up, but it's about how someone perceives the value they give to you. Now, my podcast take rate is very high because I'm very clear about the value proposition. First of all, we pretty much always have an existing relationship or something in common. I'm offering them exposure to thousands of people if they get on the podcast. I'm telling them their time commitment is only 60 to 90 minutes. They don't need to do any preparation at all. And for just about anybody in the marketing world, this is a no-brainer. And that's why the take rate is so high. Now, I also think that the value is quite high for my cold outreach to engage customers as well, because I also have a previous relationship with them, and they're highly engaged with the emails I send out. And I'm also offering them 15 minutes to talk about anything they want in their business. So what's their deal? Why are they not responding nearly as often as somebody who's getting on the podcast? Is there no value on getting on the phone to talk about their business? Or is it too valuable? Is it too much of a commitment? Are they afraid of being sold at the end of the call? What is their deal? These are all questions that I need more data to decide upon. And so until I have facts, I just need to be persistent. And I just need to keep on trying until I can get to the point where I have data to help me make that decision. And it's painful along the way. Number 7, considering the return on the time spent. Now, for most people that you send outreach to or that you try to get a hold of, responding to them is a question of time. It's an equation of time. What do they have to gain from responding to you? What is the return on the time spent? For the podcast, it's pretty obvious what they have to gain. 60 minutes gives you a backlink from my website, exposure to thousands of marketers, validation that you're an expert because you're on a wall of fame with my previous guests, the podcast artwork and the avatars, which is sort of fun. We send you a postcard with a quote that you said. You get a nice postcard with your avatar, and much more. A lot of intangibles. People who have been on my podcast have got speaking gigs from it. People on my podcast have gotten all kinds of opportunities just for joining me. And plus, I usually only reach out to people that I've met in person or have a previous relationship for. So basically, it's almost a sure thing because I've stacked the deck in my favor. Say that you're somebody who's looking for a job. Each resume you submit means you're creating more work for the hiring manager. Each interview they conduct, it's time that they aren't spent working on something else. It means more work piling on top of the work that they already need to get done. So to follow up with somebody, it means they are giving up their time. What are you giving them in return? That's a question you need to answer. The people who are going to get interviews, the people who are going to be the most successful are the ones who are answering that question. What does the person you're sending it to get in return? Now, same with my sales process. Let's break it down here for a second. I learn about a business. I send them an email. I offer up my time, which I find to be highly valuable because I would probably charge for that same amount of time. I'd charge clients somewhere around $200 for the time that I'm offering up for free. People should be dropping everything for $200 in free consulting, right? And yet they don't even read the email, or at least they don't respond to me. So what gives? I think I have an idea. They don't find much value in 15 minutes with Jeff. They look at it as a distraction. They might be paralyzed by what could come out of it. So while I personally think that my time is valuable, I'm not factoring in their motivation, their time. I'm not offering them a solution. I'm offering another problem. How do they fit me into their already packed schedule? So instead of offering a favor, which I think I'm doing with this outreach, I'm contributing to the dread. I'm contributing to their time equation, and they're not sure what the return is going to be. So I need to adjust that message if I want to hit the nail on the head. And now that I'm talking through it out loud, I can already think of ways to improve this process. Or I guess I could just keep on trying and wait for more data to roll in and see what's happening. But I'm guessing now that I've thought about it that I'm not answering that question, it's not going to be as successful as it could be. So either way, no matter what you choose, make sure you're always clear on the answer to the question, what is in it for this person? What are you giving them that's of value? And so is that a special offer? How do you give them a return on their time? And be sure to address that with any outreach you do. Number 8, should you be passive or should you be aggressive? Now, here's something that caught me by surprise during my playing around with the sales process. I made the same offer twice, and I got completely different results. Now, one of those offers was through that personal email that I said that required research, the things that we discussed in point number 7. I did 15 to 30 minutes of research on each person, each company, and then I sent off an email. And I even did a few where I recorded a video for people, and I addressed them by name just to see what would happen. And crickets. The people that I sent an email, I uploaded it to YouTube, I sent it to them, they have not responded to it at all. I'll have to go check my stats and see if they've even watched it. But it's basically been crickets. And the second way I made this offer was to put a limited time offer at the bottom of my weekly Sage email. The first 5 people, they would get a free consultation, free 15-minute consultation. Most of them took about 30 minutes in reality. But urgency and scarcity were the goal of this offer. And I got a ton of responses. I used up the first 5 within 5 minutes. So basically, within 5 minutes of the email being delivered, I had used up all 5 slots. And I've even honored some people other than that. And I've got a ton of consultations as a result. So it's the same offer with a different approach. And the passive approach is what's winning right now. But I still need more data before giving up. And the reality is that bulk emailing lets you get in front of people more often. It takes the personalness out of it. And so I still need more data before I give up on one approach or the other. And I actually think the right combination is probably doing both of them. Number 9, frequency or recency. Now, if somebody doesn't respond to your email, how often should you try again? How long should you wait? Should you email people every day, every week, every month? Now, I get thrown into a lot of sales funnels because of my business and because I'm on lists of influencers and outreach, all these different things. Most of it's unsolicited. Most of the outreach sucks. And most of them have a cadence that is something like Monday, they send the first email, they follow up on Thursday asking if I got the email, and then the next Monday morning wondering why the fuck I haven't bought the product already. Why haven't I bought a product that has no clear value proposition and only requires me to do more work? A product that I was never interested in to start with. A product that might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I will never give a crap because their outreach is so bad. There's no response cadence that would work for those emails. I will probably never buy because they have not told me what's in it for me. They're asking me to do more work. They're asking me to go click on a link and do all these things. So I try to learn from this when I do my own communication. Are people just busy? Are they not interested? Is it a numbers game or is it a top of mind game? How do I make their lives easier? Or am I asking them to commit more than they're ready to commit? Solving this is the million-dollar question, and that's why it's so important. It's not always about a question of frequency or recency. It's about understanding the psychology of the person and getting them with the message at the time they're ready to listen to it. Sometimes it's about saturation, just amount of times you have the message out there. Sometimes it's about waiting until they're ready to go. But basically, you do need to try a lot of things. You do need to be patient, and you need to have a process in order to harness it. And that leads me to number 10. Patience is a virtue. Now, I like recording these podcasts while I'm working through things because I feel that I'm going to look back at it and laugh at how childish things were at that point in my business, how infantile my processes were, how naive I was at that time, and how much better things have become after these breakthroughs. At least that's my hope as to what's going to happen. The truth is that only time is going to tell the answer to that. Yes, it's going to take time to prove that process. That's absolutely a given, but it's also going to take thinking time. Time to think through the psychology of these messages. How do they address the needs of the audience? How do they feel when they read these messages? There's a fine line between starting over with every new idea, aka having shiny object syndrome, and being a stalwart, somebody who's working on an idea that is clearly never going to resonate. And there's never a clear answer. Do you fail fast? Do you fail slowly? Well, I would rather not fail at all. And I'm naive to think that everything is going to work the first time. But I'm not too proud to admit when something isn't working how I planned it to be. So hopefully you're taking the same approach to your projects. You want to be smart, be humble, and be willing. And above all, be persistent. Because that's really how you're going to get the best results. Yes, I talk about how naive I am to think that everything's going to work the first time, but I know in reality that things are going to take time. That's part of being an entrepreneur. You have to be persistent. You have to have a short memory. Fail fast, fail slowly, whatever it is, you have to go through these things, work through it, and develop what process is going to work for you, and always be working on improving things. And there's no equation for it. There's no perfect way to do it. But if you can think about what's in the mindset of the person you're sending out the note to, what's in it for them, how you can make it more valuable, I think you're going to get better responses. And like I said, this is something where I'm workshopping something in my own mind, and I already have an idea as to how I can improve this process. And so maybe instead of offering a 15-minute consultation that just doesn't really mean much to them, I could either say, get $200 in free consulting. I can tell them specifically what we can do during that time based on the phase of their business. I can do all kinds of different things to make it seem more valuable and to make it so that instead of taking up their time, I'm saving them time. I'm giving them a return on the time they spend. And not only that, but a return on any investment they make. And so that's where I'm looking at, that's where I'm leaning towards. And hopefully when we get back to this in a couple weeks, when we do our next Jeff-isode, we might have some results to share with you. That's all for today. For show notes, visit Jeffalytics.com/persistence.